It's not what happens to you that harms you, but how you choose to deal with it. Epictetus. Ever feel like your mind's racing, you're talking more than you mean to, and focusing on everything except what truly matters? In a world drowning in noise, where quick opinions are mistaken for strength and knee-jerk reactions pass for smarts, plenty of guys have lost their footing. They're burned out, scattered, and disconnected from their own power. But the Stoics figured it out long ago. Real strength isn't about doing more, it's about doing better. It's not about shouting louder, it's about knowing when to stay quiet. It's not about thinking endlessly, it's about steering your thoughts with purpose. In this video, you'll discover how Stoic philosophy for men can help you regain your focus, toughen your mind, and act with intention. You'll learn to control what's in your power, master your inner voice, and build a presence that speaks louder than words, even in silence. You're not alone if you sometimes feel like you're slipping under a flood of distractions, but today could be the start of finding your way back. Stick with me, because when you think less, talk less, and focus more, the world doesn't own you. You own it. Hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next steps in this quiet but powerful transformation. 1. Thoughts aren't facts. Sometimes a single thought can wreck your whole day. A quiet line that creeps into your head like a shadow. I'm not good enough. Things will never change. What if it all goes wrong? Before you know it, you're living as if those words are carved in stone. But they're not. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus said it's not the events that mess us up, it's the judgments we make about them. Yet how often do we mistake a passing thought for the truth? How often do we let an unchallenged idea hold us hostage? Picture yourself at a train station. Every thought is a train rolling by. Some carry regret, others anger, others fear. But you don't have to hop on any of them. You can watch them pass. You can breathe. You can stay on the platform. This simple act of observing without reacting, a daily Stoic practice, is one of the sharpest tools against inner chaos. When you get tangled up in your thoughts, you lose control. But when you learn to step back and watch them, they lose their grip. They fade. I remember a late-night talk with a guy I worked with, a team leader everyone respected for his calm. He admitted that every morning he woke up with a knot in his stomach. Not because of what was happening around him, but because of what his mind whispered the second he opened his eyes. You're not doing enough. You're screwing up. For years, he lived as if those thoughts were verdicts. Then he stumbled across Marcus Aurelius, and something clicked. He realized he could create distance. He could say, I'm having the thought that I'm screwing up. That small shift in words changed everything. It wasn't him failing anymore. It was just a passing idea. Like a cloud, like smoke. And if you don't feed the fire, the smoke clears. This isn't about denying your thoughts or forcing yourself to think positive. That's just another way of dodging reality. It's about recognizing that your mind churns out thoughts automatically. Not all of them are useful. Many are just leftovers from old experiences, inherited fears, or unfiltered reactions. And you are not those thoughts. You're the space where they show up. You're the one who decides which thoughts to nurture and which to let drift. The Stoic practice starts with that awareness. You don't need a cabin in the woods or a meditation retreat, just a few minutes a day to pause and notice. When a thought stings, don't react, don't push it away, don't cling to it, just watch it. Ask yourself, is this really true? Do I have proof? Does this make me stronger or weaker? If it's not serving you, let it go. Not with anger, but with calm, like dropping a rock you don't need to carry anymore. Bit by bit, you carve out inner space, and in that space, something no thought can fake emerges. Clarity, quiet, steady strength. It's not magic, it's discipline. It's coming back, again and again, to the present moment, to the platform, to you. The Stoics didn't aim to stop thinking, they aimed to tame it. They knew an unguided mind is like a runaway horse. It drags you where you don't want to go. But a trained mind becomes your ally. It lights the path. And most importantly, it lets you walk it freely. So next time a voice in your head says you can't, you're not enough, or it's too late, breathe. Don't board that train. Stay with yourself. Because your thoughts don't define you. What you do with them does. That's the real strength. Quiet, internal, unshakable. 2. The power of saying less. The stronger your soul, the less it needs to justify itself. Marcus Aurelius. Some silences make people squirm, others command respect. In a world where fast talking is mistaken for smarts and loudness drowns out truth, choosing to say less is an act of defiance, not against others but against your own ego. The ego always wants the last word. It wants to clap back to be heard. But you're not here to prove anything. You're here to master yourself. There was this guy in our office meetings everyone steered clear of. Not because he was a jerk, but because he was different. He didn't talk unless he had to. He listened. He watched. And when he finally spoke, every word hit like it was carved in stone. Not because he raised his voice, but because he didn't waste a syllable. He didn't argue. He didn't explain himself. He only spoke when he had something worth saying. That made him unforgettable. The Stoics saw this as a virtue. A wise man doesn't talk out of habit. He talks by choice. He doesn't jump into verbal sparring because he knows some battles are won by staying out of them. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul grows stronger when it stays calm amid the world's noise. That's the challenge. Holding your ground when everything around you screams, provokes, and demands a response. Saying less isn't about biting your tongue out of fear. It's about choosing when to speak and when to hold back. It's knowing that not every jab deserves a counterpunch. Not every taunt needs a comeback. Not every moment calls for an explanation. When you respond to everything, you hand your energy to the world. You scatter yourself. You unravel. But when you choose silence with purpose, you sharpen your mind. You become a man who doesn't react, he acts. The Stoics weren't about people-pleasing. They were about living with virtue. And part of that virtue is not saying more than you need to. It's measuring your words like a fighter measures his punches. Because an extra word can cut deeper than you meant. And a well-timed pause can diffuse a bomb. Think back to the last time you spoke on impulse. Maybe it was a jab, a defense, an opinion you didn't need to share. Was it worth it? Or did it leave you hollow, patching the gap with regret? Silence, on the other hand, never regrets. It buys you time. It gives you perspective. It hands you back control. Saying less also makes you more present. It forces you to listen, really listen. Not to fire back, not to win, but to understand. And something wild happens. The other person lowers their guard. They feel you're not fighting, you're paying attention. And you change, too. By not talking, you start thinking clearer. Your words stop being reactions and start being choices. Epictetus taught that we should first control our impulses, then our words. That there's no greater freedom than not needing to justify yourself. That freedom isn't loud. It's in your breath, in your gaze, in the calm you carry when you choose silence, even when you could dominate with a killer argument. Saying less isn't a vibe, it's a philosophy. It's a reminder that control starts with your tongue, that real respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And in a world full of noise, a man who masters silence becomes a presence that doesn't need an introduction. So when you feel the urge to fire back, pause, breathe. Ask yourself if it's necessary, if it's useful, if it's true to who you want to be. If the answer's no, keep your words. Because sometimes the greatest strength is saying nothing. And in that silent space you grow stronger, clearer, more you. 3. Control what you can control. There are moments when the world feels like it's gunning for you. Everything breaks at once. Plans fall apart, people let you down, opportunities vanish, the past stings, and the future looms heavy. In that chaos, one question cuts through. What now? Most people look for someone to blame. Others give up. But there's a kind of man who chooses differently. He turns inward. He knows the only power that can't be taken is the power to choose how he responds. You can't pick the hand life deals you, but you can decide how to play it. Epictetus called it the split between what's in your control and what isn't. A principle as simple as it is brutal. It puts the weight of your mind on your shoulders. Not what happens, but what you let it do to you. You can't stop people from letting you down, but you can choose not to let disappointment eat you alive. You can't rewrite the past, but you can keep it from defining you. And in that moment, when you stop wrestling with what you can't change and grab the wheel of what you can, you start taking back power. Picture a ship on the open sea. The captain doesn't control the wind or the waves, but he controls the rudder, the sails, the choice to keep sailing or not. A Stoic man lives like that captain. He doesn't pretend the storm's not there or kid himself with wishful thinking. He asks, where do I have real leverage? And from there, he moves. He decides. He builds. I once talked to a guy who lost his business after 20 years. He said the hardest part wasn't the money, it was the feeling of being powerless. Watching his sense of self crumble with every unpaid bill. For months he was stuck in anger, pointing fingers, drowning in what he couldn't fix. Then he stopped. He grabbed a notebook and made 2 columns, one for what he couldn't control, one for what he could. His routine, his mindset, his discipline, his willingness to start over. From that day he didn't just rebuild a business, he built inner peace, because clarity gives you strength, and focus makes you untouchable. Marcus Aurelius, who ran an empire, knew not everything was up to him. He wrote to remind himself that happiness doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the quality of your thoughts. An emperor who could command armies couldn't command fate, yet his real power was in how he responded. By not whining, by not quitting, by staying steady in his core while the world spun out of control. Controlling what you can doesn't mean making everything perfect. It means taking the helm no matter the storm. It means when everything's shaking, you choose what stays solid inside you. Your calm, your purpose, your deliberate action. It means living from your roots, not your reactions. If you ever feel like you've lost your way, stop, breathe. Look hard at what you're trying to control and let go of what's not yours. Then pour all your energy into what you can move, no matter how small it seems. Because when you choose with clarity where to put your strength, every action becomes cleaner, sturdier, yours. That's what keeps a man from breaking even when the world falls apart. Not his luck, not his circumstances, but his relentless choice to return to what matters. Because that's where real transformation begins. Not out there, not tomorrow, but now. In what you choose to think, in how you choose to respond, in who you choose to be when no one else gets a say. 4. Focus on what makes you grow. Maybe you've been there. A conversation ends, but you keep replaying it in your head for days. A mistake from months ago still keeps you up at night. Someone hurt you, and even though they're long gone, the wound's still raw. Not because of what happened, but because you keep feeding it. Your mind's like fertile soil. It grows whatever you plant. If you sow pain, guilt, or resentment, don't expect to harvest peace. The problem isn't remembering. It's staying stuck there. In that moment, in that thought, looping like a broken record. Sometimes, without realizing it, you turn your mind into a prison, and you're holding the key. But you're not doomed to stay trapped, because what you think isn't a life sentence. It's a choice. This isn't about ignoring the past or pretending everything's fine. It's about redirecting your attention over and over to what builds you up, what makes you stronger. A man who keeps looking back doesn't move forward, no matter how fast he's running. It doesn't matter how hard you try if your focus is on what you can't change. But when you choose to look where there's light, something opens inside you. Not loudly, not instantly, but it opens. And that's where real growth starts. Marcus Aurelius, in the middle of wars, betrayals, and illness, wrote in his quiet nights that the soul grows stronger by focusing only on what's essential. On what life demands of you today, not plus, not yesterday, not tomorrow, today. Because the present, flawed as it is the only place you can act. Your attention is the bridge between who you are and who you could become. Every time you catch your mind wandering and pull it back to now, you're flexing that invisible muscle called self-discipline. Think about any day of your life. You've had thousands of thoughts, some fleeting, some heavy, but only a few shaped your actions. Only a few stole your energy. The trick isn't to stop them, it's to stop feeding them. To do that, you need to come back. Back to your breath, back to your body, back to what actually matters. A guy once commented on a Stoic video I saw, "Every time I start moving forward, my mind drags me back to the same memory, to the same person who hurt me, and I lose hours there, like it's still happening." I got it. We've all been there. But the key isn't to run from the thought. It's time to face it, acknowledge it. Then, with resolve, decide it doesn't get any more of your space today. Even if it's just for an hour, send your energy towards something that pushes you forward. The Stoics didn't talk about bottling things up. They talked about transforming. Taking that emotion anchoring you down and using it as a signal of what you still need to release. That transformation starts with a quiet choice. what you give your attention to. Every time you choose to focus on what adds value, reading, training, building, you're telling the world and yourself, I'm not wasting another day on what I can't change. You can't control every thought that pops into your head, but you can decide which ones stick around. And that decision, made day after day, becomes your character, your direction, your strength. A strength that doesn't shout, but it shows in how you look, how you move, how you choose, in how you keep pushing forward, quietly, while others stay stuck in their own storms. Focusing isn't a gift, it's a skill. And like any skill, it gets sharper with practice. So when your mind tries to pull you back to pain, to the past, to chaos, don't fight it. Don't follow it. Breathe, acknowledge, and come back. Because where you place your attention, your life grows. 5. Accept what is. If you're pained by something external, the pain isn't from the thing itself, it's from your perception of it. And you have the power to change that perception. Marcus Aurelius. Most men don't crumble under the load, they crumble from fighting it. They want life to be different. They want people not to let them down. They want the past to stop hurting. They want things to go as planned, but they didn't. And the more they wrestle with that reality, the more they wear themselves out, the more they break inside. Because it's not the weight that crushes you, it's how you carry it. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's not sitting back. It's stopping the fight against what's already done. It's looking square at the loss, the mistake, the betrayal, and deciding they won't define you, that you won't build who you are on what went wrong. Because as long as you keep wishing things were how you wanted, you're chained to a fantasy. But when you accept, you breathe. And from that new calm, you can pick a new path. A guy emailed me a while back. He said he'd spent years chasing his dad's approval, tried to be the perfect son, the hotshot professional, the tough guy. But nothing was ever enough. Then his dad passed away. The loss was brutal, but worse was the unresolved weight, the years he spent trying to be seen, accepted, valued. Then he read Epictetus and got it. Freedom starts when you stop begging for permission to be you. Living for someone else's nod is living in shackles, even if they're invisible. That day, he started talking to himself with respect, not because his dad gave it to him, but because he decided he didn't need it anymore. The Stoics taught that we can't control how the world sees us, but we can control how we see ourselves. Everyone's filtering reality through their own scars, beliefs, and fears. So if someone shuts you out, it doesn't mean you're worthless. It means they couldn't see your worth. But you can. You have to. Because if you don't, no one else will. Acceptance is also about dropping the guilt. That inner voice droning on about what you should have done, could have avoided, what you lost. The past can't be rewritten. It can only be understood and used as raw material to build. When you accept something's over, you can start again. Not from nothing, but from experience. Resilience isn't just enduring. It's learning. It's growing with every fall. Not with anger, with purpose. Not in a rush, with direction. Because every hit that doesn't break you reveals you. It shows what you can hold, what you can leave behind. And yeah, loneliness comes with it. When you stop living for approval, some people drift away. You don't fit their mold anymore. You're not easy to handle. But that's part of your freedom too. Being alone as your true self beats being surrounded but cut off from who you are. So next time something doesn't go your way, don't ask, why me? Ask, what can I do now with what I've got? Don't wait for life to line up before you start living. Start now, with what's here, with who you are, with what you know today. And every time you do, you'll feel something shift inside. Not noise, not hype, something deeper, a root, a strength that doesn't come from the outside, but from accepting finally that you don't need to be anyone else. You just need to be fully you. Even when it hurts, even when it's hard, because in that acceptance, your real transformation begins. 6. Embrace silence for clarity. There's a noise you can't hear, but it wears you down. It's not from the street, your phone, or other people. It's from inside, from a mind overloaded, chasing everything, trying to fix, solve, respond. We're surrounded by stimulation, opinions, comparisons, demands. From the second you wake up to the moment you crash, there's a constant push. Do more, know more, be more. And in that barrage, what you lose isn't time, it's direction. Without silence, everything blurs together. And when everything feels the same, nothing really matters. But silence isn't emptiness, it's a shelter. The only place you can hear what you actually think, what you actually feel, what you actually want. Maybe you've been walking a path you didn't choose, chasing goals that aren't yours, running after wins that don't fill you up, because you never stopped to ask if they were really yours. Silence forces you to, not with force, with clarity. Because when the outside world quiets down, what's left is who you are. A guy who watched my videos every day told me he used to pack his schedule tight, couldn't stand downtime, not even 10 minutes of nothing. He said if he wasn't busy, he felt worthless. But one day, in the middle of a panic attack, he forced himself to sit. No music, no phone, no one. 5 minutes, just 5. And in those 5 minutes he cried. Not from sadness, from truth. He realized how much he'd been running, how much noise he'd used to drown out what he needed to face. Now, every morning starts with silence. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because that's where he found answers no book or advice could give. The Stoics didn't shy away from silence, they leaned into it. Marcus Aurelius wrote at night alone, not to show off, but to hear himself. To sort his mind before making choices that shaped an empire. He knew a noisy mind isn't a free mind, it's trapped in the clutter of what doesn't matter. Epictetus taught that the wise don't speak out of habit, but out of need. And what's left unsaid often says more than any speech. Silence lets you see. See what's worth your time and what's just a distraction. See who you are without the world's eyes on you. See your habits, your fears, your deepest wants. But it takes guts. Because silence also confronts you. It shows you hard truths. It reminds you of what you've been dodging. But that's where change happens. Not in comfort, but in the uneasy space where you stop running. If you're lost, don't chase more noise. Chase more silence. Turn off the clutter. Shut your mouth for a second, not because you've got nothing to say, but because you need to hear yourself first. You need to reconnect with what matters. And that's not out there. It's not in the next goal or the next answer. It's in that quiet point where everything stops, and you finally meet yourself. The world won't hush for you. There'll always be more news, more demands, more voices. But you can choose not to tune into all of them. You can create a pause, a gap, a sacred space where you're you again, not what's expected, not what's copied, but what you are. Because only a man who can be quiet can truly listen. And only someone who listens to what matters can live with purpose. Silence isn't weakness, it's a mark of inner control, of mental clarity, of real power. 7. Talk less, think more. Most guys don't get in trouble for what they don't say. They get in trouble for what they say without thinking. A word spit out in anger. An opinion tossed without care. A response fired off on impulse. And that's where the damage starts. Not always out there, but inside. Because every time you speak without awareness, you drift a little further from yourself. In a world where everyone's scrambling to be heard, the man who knows when to stay quiet stands out. Think of your mind as a blade. Every word you speak is a swing. If you don't train that blade, it'll cut you deeper than anyone else. But if you learn when to swing, when to sheath it, when to sharpen it in silence, you become hard to rattle. Talking less doesn't mean you're worth less. It means you've got more direction, more control, more clarity. Because not every thought needs to be voiced. Not every feeling needs to be aired. Not every comment deserves your response. A guy reached out after a family blow-up. He said he lost it over something small, but the anger had been building for weeks. From words he didn't say when he should have. From emotions he ignored. From judgments he threw like daggers. When it was over, he felt empty. Because deep down he knew those words weren't his truth, just echoes of the inner mess he didn't catch in time. So he started a rule. Pause before answering. Even if it's 2 seconds, even if it feels like nothing, those seconds changed how he lives. Because they gave him room to choose, to think, to respond calmly. The Stoics leaned hard into the power of the pause. Epictetus said we're not thrown off by events, but by how we interpret them. And that interpretation usually kicks in before you open your mouth. So the guy who masters that tiny gap between trigger and response doesn't just win arguments, he shapes his character, his path, his energy. In a heated moment, silence can be your sharpest defense, not because you're out of ammo, but because you know not every fight's worth your fire. In a big conversation, a pause can give your words more weight than any volume. Because what's said without rush, without anxiety, without needing to win, lands differently. Speaking with intention is an art, and like any art, it takes practice, awareness, guts to not get sucked into the noise. Today, we're bombarded with prompts to react, to post, to weigh in, to prove something. But showing restraint isn't bottling up, it's choosing where your words come from ego or from the center, from hurt or from wisdom, from needing to be heard or from the freedom of not needing anyone's thumbs up. That's what separates a reactive man from a grounded one. You won't always control what you feel, but you can control how you express it. You can learn to watch your thoughts without letting them speak for you. You can train yourself to pause, to breathe before you talk, to wait for the right moment. Because the man who masters his words doesn't just communicate better, he respects himself more. And a man who respects himself gets respect. So next time you feel the itch to fire back, stop. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong. Not because you're scared, but because you're focused. Because talking less isn't holding back, it's letting go of what doesn't need to be said. And that, in times like these, is a quiet kind of power few ever master. You can be one of them. Real strength isn't about lifting heavier weights or yelling louder. It's forged in silence. In the moments you choose to